She accidentally married a billionaire husband, and he refused to let her go. Hi, my very beautiful, precious and loyal family. How are you today? I love you with all my heart, my beautiful family. You are not just followers. You are my real family, my joy, my strength, and my reason to smile every single day. My beautiful sisters and brothers, my amazing daughters and sons, each one of you is a shining star in my sky, and I thank God for blessing me with you. A deep and loving prayer for my beautiful family. May your hearts always overflow with love, your homes be filled with laughter, and your lives be surrounded by true peace. May you wake up every day with purpose, walk through every challenge with courage, and end each night wrapped in the comfort of hope. I pray that blessings chase you down, that joy finds you even in the quiet moments, and that you never feel alone, because my love is always with you. You are loved more than words can express. My sweet and loyal family, thank you for the love you showed in the last video. You made me feel alive again. We are rising once more, and your love is the wings that carry me. But I need your support now more than ever. Please like, comment, and share every video so we can spread love together and make our beautiful family even stronger. Let's start with love, my beautiful family. I am nothing without you. Blanca Colano stared at the hospital bill in her trembling hands, the $250,000 figure blurring through her tears. Outside the intensive care unit, her grandmother's heartbeat monitor beeped steadily, each sound a reminder of how quickly time was running out. There must be some mistake, she whispered to the sympathetic nurse. A heart transplant can't possibly cost this much. I'm so sorry, Miss Colano, without insurance coverage for pre-existing conditions. The nurse trailed off, her expression conveying what words couldn't. Blanca tucked a stray curl behind her ear and straightened her shoulders. At 25, she had already weathered more storms than most people twice her age. Abandoned by her parents at 7, she had been raised by her grandmother Elena, a woman who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at life. Now, when Elena needed her most, Blanca was coming up desperately short. I understand. Thank you for your time. Her voice remained steady even as her world collapsed. Outside the hospital, the New York summer heat pressed against her like a physical. Wait. 3 jobs, boutique salesgirl by day, waitress by evening, and freelance seamstress until dawn. And she had only managed to save $15,000, not even close to enough. The fashion design degree she'd worked so hard for hung uselessly on her wall while her sketches gathered dust beneath her bed. Her phone vibrated with a text from Zoe, her roommate who worked for Elite Occasions, Manhattan's most exclusive wedding. Planning service. Emergency. Client needs stand-in bride for rehearsal tomorrow, offering $10,000 for 1 day. Interested? Blanca froze mid-step, causing a businessman to collide with her shoulder. She barely noticed his irritated glare as she reread the message. $10,000 in 1 day. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would buy time, precious time her grandmother desperately needed. What would I need to do? She texted back. Just stand in for practice ceremony. Rich client, super private. Wear dress, say lines, smile pretty, easy money. Blanca bit her lip. It sounded too good to be true, but Zoe had worked for Elite Occasions for years. If anyone understood the extravagant whims of the wealthy, it was her. I'll do it, she replied, pushing away the whisper of unease crawling up her spine. Across, in town, in a glass-walled penthouse office 60 floors above Manhattan, John Charnock slammed his fist against his desk, causing his lawyer to flinch. What do you mean? She backed out. The ceremony is tomorrow. His voice remained controlled, but ice coated every syllable. At 32, John had built Charnock Technologies from a dorm room startup into a multi-billion-dollar empire. His ruggedly handsome features, usually arranged in calculated charm, now darkened with genuine fury. Miss Winters had concerns about the arrangement. his lawyer, Marcus Pembroke, explained delicately. Her father received a better offer from Westfield Industries. John turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection superimposed over the Manhattan skyline he'd conquered. Then find someone else. John, your grandfather's will stipulates marriage within 5 years of his death to maintain controlling interest. That deadline expires in 48 hours. The board is already positioning to vote you out. I'm aware of the deadline, Marcus. John's jaw tightened. 5 years ago, he'd agreed to his grandfather's archaic stipulation, confident he could navigate it when the time came. He'd selected Diana Winters carefully, from an appropriate family, with appropriate connections, willing to enter an appropriate arrangement for mutual benefit. The marriage would have been a business transaction, nothing more. The elite occasions. Un planner called, Marcus continued carefully. They have a stand-in for tomorrow's rehearsal. We could modify the plan. John turned slowly. Explain. The rehearsal could become the actual ceremony. The stand-in signs the legal documents thinking they're release forms. We pay her handsomely afterward for her trouble, file for annulment in a few weeks. You maintain control of the company. You're suggesting fraud, Marcus. John's voice was dangerously soft. I'm suggesting a solution to an impossible situation. Unless you're prepared to lose everything your grandfather left you. John stared. At the portrait on his wall, Solomon Charnock, the man who had reluctantly taken him in at 7 after his parents' death, who had raised him with cold precision, teaching him that love was weakness and trust was for fools. The man whose approval he had spent his life chasing and never receiving. Show me her information, John said, finally. Marcus slid a tablet across the desk. The screen displayed a simple photograph, a young woman with warm brown skin, curly black, hair pulled into a messy bun, and eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. Unlike the carefully curated social media profiles John typically encountered, this image captured something rare. Authenticity. Blanca Colano, 25. Fashion design graduate, works multiple jobs. No criminal record, no significant social media presence, no family except a grandmother in hospital. Completely under the radar. John studied her face, feeling an unexpected tug of curiosity. She's beautiful, he observed clinically. Arrange it, but double the payment. I don't want complications afterward. The next day, Blanca stood in an opulent dressing room at the Charnock estate, barely recognizing herself in the mirror. The wedding dress, a sleek, modern creation of silk and delicate lace, fit as though it had been designed for her, which Zoe assured her was merely good fortune. The bride and you are apparently the same size, Zoe explained hurriedly, adjusting Blanca's hair. Just remember your lines, smile at the appropriate moments, and this will be the easiest money you've ever made. Who exactly am I standing in? For? Blanca asked, noticing how Zoe avoided her eyes. That's confidential, just a very private client who needs absolute discretion. Zoe handed her a stack of papers. Sign these photo releases and we're all set. Blanca skimmed the documents, her attention divided between the dense legal text and the surreal situation. The room's luxury, from the crystal chandelier to the champagne chilling in a silver bucket, made her increasingly uneasy. But every time doubt crept in, she thought of her grandmother's hospital room and pushed the pen across the signature lines. Perfect! Zoe collected the papers with suspicious haste. Ready to get married? Blanca followed her through the mansion's hallways, into a breathtaking garden where white roses and cherry blossoms created a canopy above rows of empty chairs. At the end of the aisle stood a somber officiator and a tall figure with his back turned. Just count to 10 after the music starts, then walk slowly, Zoe whispered before disappearing. When the classical music swelled from hidden speakers, Blanca took a deep breath and began the practice walk, focusing on not tripping in the unfamiliar heels. She kept her eyes lowered until she reached the altar. When she finally looked up, her breath caught in her throat. The man before her was devastating. Tall and broad-shouldered, with deep blue eyes that widened slightly upon meeting hers. Dark hair, artfully tousled, framed features that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture, strong jaw, defined cheekbones, and lips that curved into a practiced half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Blanca Colano?" he asked quietly, his voice a rich baritone that sent an inexplicable shiver down her spine. She nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. "John Charnock." He extended his hand, and when she took it, a jolt of awareness passed between them, causing her to quickly withdraw her fingers. The ceremony proceeded like a surreal dream. Blanca repeated the lines she'd memorized, trying to ignore how intensely. John watched her as though searching for something in her expression. When instructed to exchange rings, she was surprised by the weight of the platinum band slipped onto her finger. "Such attention to detail," she murmured. Something flickered. In John's eyes, regret, guilt, before his expression smoothed again. "I believe in authenticity." The officiator's final words penetrated Blanca's consciousness too late. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Before she could process what was happening, John's hand gently cupped her cheek, and he leaned down to brush his lips against hers, in a kiss that, though brief, sent heat cascading through her body. For one suspended moment, they remained connected, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made the world recede. It was only at the reception, hidden behind a column with champagne she was too nervous to drink, that Blanca overheard the conversation that shattered the illusion. "Congratulations, John," Marcus said, clinking glasses with her supposed pretend husband. "The board can't touch you now. Your billion-dollar marriage is secure." "Until the annulment," John replied calmly. "The stand-in has no idea?" "None. According to the law, you're legally married. Once we secure your company position, we'll handle the girl." The champagne flute slipped from Blanca's fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Both men turned, finding her standing there with horror dawning on her face. "You," she whispered, backing away as John's expression changed from surprise to calculation. "That wasn't a rehearsal. This is real." She looked down at the ring on her finger, no longer a prop but a shackle, and realized with sickening clarity exactly what she had inadvertently done. Chapter 2. An Impossible Proposition. "Get away from me!" Blanca hissed, backing toward the exit as John approached with calculated steps. Her entire body trembled with rage and betrayal, the beautiful wedding dress now feeling like a costume in a cruel farce. "Blanca, let me explain." John's voice remained infuriatingly calm, his blue eyes revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Explain what? That you just committed fraud? That you tricked me into a legal marriage?" Her voice rose dangerously, causing nearby guests to turn their heads. "I heard everything. Your billion-dollar marriage. Using me to keep your company?" John's jaw tightened as he glanced around the room. In one swift movement, he took her elbow and guided her firmly toward a private side room, dismissing his lawyer with a sharp nod. "Take your hands off me." Blanca yanked her arm away the moment the door closed behind them. "I'm calling the police." "That would be unwise," John replied, maintaining a careful distance between them. "The documents you signed are legally binding. Your signature is on every page." "Because I was lied to. I was told this was a rehearsal." Tears of frustration burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, refused to show weakness before this man who had used her so callously. "A misunderstanding that any competent lawyer would clarify." John's tone softened marginally. "However, I'm prepared to make this situation advantageous for both of us." Blanca laughed bitterly. "There is nothing you could offer me that would make this okay." $5 million. The words hung in the air between them, momentarily stealing Blanca's breath. What? Stay married to me for 1 year, attend necessary functions as my wife, maintain appearances. John's eyes assessed her reaction with clinical precision. At the end of that time, you walk away with $5 million and a clean divorce. More than enough for your grandmother's medical expenses and to launch whatever fashion career you desire. Blanca's mind reeled. The sum was unfathomable, enough to save her grandmother and secure her future. But the cost, you think you can just buy people, that everything has a price tag. She stepped closer, her fury giving her courage. I'm not for sale, Mr. Charnock. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps even respect, before his expression hardened again. Everyone has a price, Miss Colano. I'm simply offering yours up front rather than wasting both our time. Then you've severely miscalculated. Blanca moved toward the door. I'll see you in court. Your grandmother won't survive that long. Blanca froze, her hand on the doorknob. When she turned back, her eyes blazed with such intensity that John actually took a step back. How dare you? How dare you use her illness against me? Her voice was deadly quiet. You know nothing about me or my family. I know Elena Colano, age 67, needs a heart transplant that costs $250,000 plus ongoing care. I know you've been working 3 jobs trying to save money. I know you agreed to this rehearsal out of desperation. John's voice remained even. I'm offering you a solution. By exploiting my desperation, by trapping me in a marriage based on lies? Blanca's voice cracked. What kind of man does that make you? For the first time, something genuine crossed John's face, a flash of shame quickly suppressed. He walked to the window, his broad shoulders tense beneath his tailored jacket. Thus you did, Higgins, who was raised to secure victory at any cost. He turned back to her. I need this marriage to retain control of my company. You need money to save your grandmother. It's a simple transaction. There's nothing simple about marriage. It's just a legal arrangement. We'll maintain separate lives in my penthouse, separate bedrooms. I won't touch you. The last words were spoken with such emphasis that Blanca felt an inexplicable flush warm her cheeks. And my freedom, my life, my dignity, all preserved. You can continue your design work. I'll provide a studio. Your only obligation is public appearances as my wife. John's expression softened marginally. 1 year of inconvenience for a lifetime, of security for both you and your grandmother. Blanca's phone buzzed in the hidden pocket of her wedding dress. Her heart sank as she saw the hospital's number. Miss Colano, we need you to come immediately. Your grandmother has taken a turn for the worse. The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. I'll be right there. She ended the call and found John watching her, his expression unreadable. She needs me, Blanca whispered, suddenly feeling the weight of her situation crushing down upon her. I'll have my driver take you. John's voice had changed, the business tone giving way to something almost gentle. Regardless of your decision about our arrangement, I'll cover today's hospital expenses. Blanca looked up in surprise. Why would you do that? Consider it compensation for today's misunderstanding. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Blanca glimpsed something behind John's carefully constructed facade. A flicker of humanity beneath the billionaire exterior. I don't want your charity, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not charity, it's responsibility. He reached for his phone. My driver will be out front in 2 minutes. Hours later, Blanca sat beside her grandmother's hospital bed, listening to the steady beep of monitors while doctors explained the deteriorating situation. Without immediate intervention and placement on the transplant list, requiring substantial upfront payment, Elena's chances were diminishing by the day. When she finally left the room to get coffee, she found John Charnock waiting in the hallway, his tall figure oddly out of place among the hospital's sterile walls. He'd changed from his wedding suit into dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt that somehow made him look more approachable. "How is she?" he asked quietly. Blanca was too exhausted for anger. "Dying, unless she gets on the transplant list immediately." John nodded, his expression somber. "I've spoken with the hospital administrator. There's a specialist in Houston who's had remarkable success with cases like hers." "What have you done?" Blanca's fatigue gave way to alarm. "Nothing yet. The choice is yours." He extended a folded document. "This is a contract. 1 year of marriage. In exchange for immediate payment of all your grandmother's medical expenses and $5 million upon completion." Blanca stared at the paper, feeling trapped between impossible choices. Why me? You could find 100 women willing to enter this arrangement knowingly. Something unexpected crossed John's face. Vulnerability so brief she might have imagined. "It's because you're not after my money. You proved that today." His voice dropped lower. "And because when you looked at me during that ceremony, you saw me. Not my wealth, not my company. Just me." The admission hung between them, startlingly honest amid so much deception. "I can't share your bed," she whispered, her cheeks warming. "At the very thought. I would never ask that of you." His voice was firm. "Our arrangement would be strictly professional." Blanca looked through the window at her grandmother, the woman who had given everything to raise her, who had worked 3 jobs to put her through design school, who had never once complained about the sacrifices. "If I agree, I have conditions," she said finally. "I keep my job at the boutique. I maintain my independence, and the moment you break your word or try to control me, the deal is off." John extended his hand. "Agreed." When their fingers met, that same inexplicable spark passed between them, causing both to hold the contact a heartbeat longer than necessary. "I should warn you," Blanca said, withdrawing her hand. "I'm a terrible actress. I won't pretend to adore you in public." A ghost of a smile touched John's lips. "I wouldn't expect you to. Mutual respect will be convincing enough." As they stood in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the hospital corridor, neither could have predicted how completely this arrangement would transform both their lives, or how quickly their carefully constructed boundaries would begin to crumble. That night, as Blanca packed a small suitcase in her tiny apartment, preparing to move into the penthouse of a man who was now legally her husband, she couldn't stop her fingers from trembling. She had just agreed to a year of living with a stranger, a dangerously handsome, impossibly wealthy stranger who had already proven he was willing to deceive her to get what he wanted. Yet when she closed her eyes, it wasn't fear she felt, but an unsettling awareness that had begun the moment their eyes first met across that altar. An awareness that whispered this arrangement might prove dangerous in ways neither of them had anticipated. Chapter 3. Behind the Walls. John Charnock's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of Manhattan's most exclusive residential building, a glass and steel monument to wealth that pierced the skyline like a modern spear. Blanca stood frozen in the private elevator, clutching her worn suitcase as they ascended 60 floors in hushed, smooth silence. "The staff has been informed that we had a private ceremony after a brief engagement," John explained, his eyes fixed on the climbing numbers. "They're discreet and well compensated for their silence." Blanca nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Just 3 days ago, she had been a struggling designer, sharing a cramped apartment in Brooklyn. Now her grandmother was in Houston being evaluated by the country's leading cardiac specialist, and she was moving in with a billionaire who was legally her husband. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, Blanca couldn't suppress a small gasp. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Manhattan, bathed in sunset gold. Minimalist furnishings in shades of grey and blue occupied a space so vast she could have fit her entire apartment in the living room alone. "Your suite is upstairs," John said, watching her reaction carefully. I took the liberty of having some essentials arranged, but we can purchase whatever else you need tomorrow." "I don't need anything," Blanca replied automatically, her pride flaring. "I brought everything important." Something that might have been amusement flickered in John's eyes. "As you wish." He led her up a floating staircase to the second level and down a corridor to a set of double doors. When he opened them, Blanca's carefully maintained composure nearly crumbled. The suite was larger than any home she'd ever lived in, a bedroom with a king-sized bed draped in cream linens, a sitting area with a fireplace, a bathroom with a soaking tub beside floor-to-ceiling windows, and a walk-in closet larger than her previous bedroom. "My suite is at the opposite end of the floor," John indicated with a gesture. "Your privacy is guaranteed." Blanca stepped inside, placing her suitcase carefully on a bench. "It's very nice. Thank you." An awkward silence stretched between them until John cleared his throat. "Dinner will be ready at 7 if you'd care to join me. Otherwise, I can have something sent up." "I'll join you," Blanca said, surprising herself. "We should probably discuss expectations." John nodded, his expression unreadable. 7 then. After he left, Blanca sank onto the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the impossibly soft duvet. This arrangement was purely transactional, she reminded herself. A business deal. The fact that her heart raced whenever those intense blue eyes focused on her was merely a physiological response to stress, nothing more. Dinner was served in a formal dining room with a view of the city lights now twinkling against the night sky. Blanca had changed into the nicest outfit she'd brought, a simple black dress she'd designed and sewn herself, with subtle detailing that revealed her skill. John looked up when she entered, and for a brief moment, genuine appreciation crossed his features. "That's a beautiful dress." "Thank you." "I made it," she replied, taking the seat a uniformed server held out for her. John's eyebrows raised slightly. "You're talented." "I have a degree in fashion design from Parsons," Blanca said, unfolding her napkin. "Not that I've had much opportunity to use it, until now, perhaps." John nodded to the server, who poured wine into crystal glasses. "There's a spare room on this floor that could be converted into a design studio if you're interested." Blanca looked up in surprise. "That's generous." "It's practical. You'll need something to occupy your time." His tone was matter-of-fact, but not unkind. "And it would support our narrative if you were developing a collection as my wife." "Our narrative." The reminder of their arrangement cooled Blanca's momentary warmth. "Of course, the illusion must be maintained." John studied her over the rim of his wineglass. "You disapprove of deception. I prefer honesty, even when it's difficult." She met his gaze directly. "Which is why I should tell you I plan to maintain my job at the boutique. That's unnecessary now." His response was immediate, almost dismissive. "It's non-negotiable," Blanca countered. "I won't be financially dependent on you, regardless of our arrangement." John's expression shifted from surprise to something like respect. "Most women in your position would be planning shopping sprees, not keeping retail jobs." "I'm not most women, Mr. Charnock, clearly." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and considering our marital status, perhaps John would be more appropriate. The intimacy of using his first name sent an unexpected shiver through Blanca. "John," she repeated softly, testing the sound of it on her lips. Something changed in the atmosphere between them, a subtle shift that both recognized but neither acknowledged. The conversation turned to practical matters, schedules, social obligations, the boundaries of their arrangement. By dessert, Blanca felt more at ease, until John mentioned an upcoming dinner party. "It's this Saturday. The Prestons are key investors, and they've been eager to meet my wife." "So soon?" Anxiety tightened Blanca's chest. "I don't know anything." About your business or your social circle. You don't need to. Just be yourself. John's voice softened slightly. Your authenticity is refreshing in a world of calculated personas. Blanca looked down at her plate, unsettled by the unexpected compliment. And what if I embarrass you? You won't. The certainty in his voice was strangely reassuring. Saturday arrived too quickly. Blanca stood before the mirror in her suite, examining her reflection with critical eyes. She'd chosen another of her own designs, a deep emerald dress with subtle structural elements that flattered her figure without being overtly sexy. A knock at her door startled her. "Come in," she called, expecting a staff member. Instead, John entered, impeccable in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and tall frame. He stopped abruptly when he saw her, his customary composure slipping for a moment. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice lower than usual. Blanca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you." He approached slowly, holding out a slim velvet box. "I thought you might want to wear these tonight." Inside lay a delicate platinum necklace set, with emeralds that perfectly matched her dress. "I can't accept this," she said automatically. "It's not a gift," John replied. "It's part of the appearance we need to maintain. My wife would wear appropriate jewelry." Blanca hesitated, then turned her back to him. "Will you help me put it on?" John stepped closer, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck as he fastened the clasp. Blanca held her breath at the contact, acutely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne, the warmth radiating from his body. "There," he murmured, his breath stirring the curls near her ear. When Blanca turned to face him, they stood, closer than she'd anticipated. For one breathless moment neither moved away. "We should go," John said finally, offering his arm with formal courtesy. The Preston dinner proved more challenging than Blanca had feared. The women, dressed in designer labels and dripping with diamonds, assessed her with calculating eyes, while the men evaluated her as if appraising a new acquisition. "So tell us, Blanca," Victoria Preston drawled over cocktails, "how did you manage to catch Manhattan's most elusive bachelor? We're all dying to know." The circle of socialites tightened around her, their smiles not reaching their eyes. "I didn't catch him," Blanca replied evenly. "We simply found each other." "How romantic!" Victoria's voice dripped with insincerity. "And what exactly did you do before becoming Mrs. Charnock?" "Martha mentioned you worked in a little shop somewhere." The condescension was unmistakable. Across the room, Blanca caught John watching the exchange, his expression alert. "I'm a fashion designer," Blanca said, straightening her shoulders. "And yes, I work at Ellison's boutique in Chelsea. My independence matters to me, something you've probably never had to consider." "Oh, retail." Victoria exchanged glances with the other women. "How quaint. I suppose we all start somewhere, though personally I've never had to work a day in my life." "What a shame," Blanca replied with genuine sympathy. "There's nothing quite like the satisfaction of earning something through your own efforts." Victoria's smile froze. "Are you suggesting that hard work builds character?" "Absolutely." Blanca sipped her champagne. "Though I understand not everyone has the capacity for it." A strangled cough from one of the other women barely disguised a laugh. Victoria's face flushed with anger. "Well, we all know what capacity caught John's attention," she hissed, glancing pointedly at Blanca's figure. "Though I must say he usually prefers more sophisticated women." Before Blanca could respond, John appeared at her side, his hand settling protectively at the small of her back. "I see you've met my wife," he said, his tone pleasant, but his eyes challenging as they rested on Victoria. "Blanca's remarkable talent is matched only by her integrity, qualities I've found exceedingly rare." The subtle rebuke silenced Victoria, whose smile turned brittle. Throughout dinner, John remained attentive, his hand occasionally brushing Blanca's in a gesture that appeared affectionate to observers, but sent unexpected warmth through her each time. When his business partner Maxwell Reed mentioned a new development project, Blanca asked an insightful question that led to an animated discussion, demonstrating an intelligence that clearly surprised the table. As they drove home later that night, a comfortable silence settled between them until John spoke. "You handled Victoria perfectly," he said, his eyes on the city lights passing outside the window. "She's been trying to secure an invitation to my bed for years." Blanca's cheeks warmed at his bluntness. "She made her opinion of me quite clear." "Her opinion is irrelevant." John turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You showed more class and intelligence tonight than most of the socialites I've known for years." The genuine praise caught Blanca off guard. "Thank you." When they reached the penthouse, John walked her to her suite, pausing at the doorway. "Good night, Blanca." His voice had softened, and for a moment she glimpsed something behind his careful facade, a loneliness that mirrored her own. "Good night, John." As she closed the door between them, Blanca leaned against it, her heart beating an unfamiliar rhythm. This arrangement was becoming more complicated than either had anticipated, lines blurring where they should remain distinct. And the most troubling realization of all was how little she wanted to redraw those lines. Chapter 4. The First Test. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Blanca had established a routine that maintained her independence while fulfilling her obligations as John's wife. She worked at the boutique 3 days a week, spent time designing in the studio John had created for her, and accompanied him to carefully selected social functions where their marriage needed to be displayed. To her surprise, John respected her boundaries meticulously. He never entered her suite without permission, never questioned her comings and goings, and never demanded more than her public presence at his side. The careful distance between them should have been a relief. Instead, Blanca found herself increasingly aware of his absence, noticing the moments when their paths didn't cross. One Tuesday evening, she returned from visiting her grandmother in Houston to find the penthouse unusually quiet. Elena's recovery from her first surgery was going well, with a transplant now a real possibility rather than a distant hope. "Mr. Charnock is working late, ma'am," the housekeeper informed her. "He asked me to tell you not to wait up." Blanca nodded, ignoring the small pang of disappointment. She had grown accustomed to their evening conversations over dinner, the gradual revealing of each other's thoughts and histories. For a marriage built on deception, they had developed an unexpected habit of honesty in their private moments. She was sketching in her studio when the doorbell rang shortly before midnight. Curious, she made her way downstairs, arriving in the foyer as the housekeeper admitted a striking blonde woman in a dress that left little to the imagination. "I'm here to see John," the woman announced, her gaze dismissive as it swept over Blanca's. "Simple loungewear. You must be the new housekeeper." "Actually, I'm his wife," Blanca replied, extending her hand with deliberate politeness. "Blanca Charnock. And you are?" The woman's perfectly sculpted features froze in shock before recovering into a brittle smile. "Victoria Evans, an old friend of John's." She ignored Blanca's outstretched hand. "I need to speak with him privately." "He's not home," Blanca said. "I'd be happy to tell him you stopped by." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "How convenient. Perhaps I'll wait." Before Blanca could respond, the woman strode past her into the living room, making herself comfortable on the sofa as if she owned the place. "Please." "Do," Blanca replied, her voice even despite her irritation. "Would you like some tea while you wait?" Victoria's laugh was sharp and artificial. "Darling, I'd prefer champagne. The Krug Clos d'Ambonnet, 1995. If John still keeps it, he always did save it for special occasions between us." The intimate implication was unmistakable, but Blanca refused to take the bait. "I'll see what we have." In the kitchen, she took a steadying breath. This was John's past, a past she had no claim on and no right to feel possessive about. Their marriage was a business arrangement, nothing more. So why did Victoria's insinuations bother her so much? When she returned with a crystal flute of champagne, Victoria had moved from the sofa to examine the few personal photographs displayed on a side table, most added recently at Blanca's insistence to make the penthouse feel less like a luxury hotel. "How quaint," Victoria murmured, lifting a photo of Blanca with her grandmother. "John always said he'd never marry a woman with attachments. Money and love are such messy combinations." She turned, her smile predatory. "But then, this isn't about love, is it?" Blanca felt a chill. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, please." Victoria waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Manhattan's most eligible bachelor marries an unknown shopgirl after a secret whirlwind romance. It's obviously an arrangement. The only question is what he's getting besides the obvious." Her gaze raked insultingly over Blanca's body. Blanca set down the champagne with careful precision. "I think you should leave. After I make you an offer." Victoria's tone shifted to businesslike efficiency. $500,000 for information. About Project Midas." Blanca blinked. "Excuse me?" "John's new security encryption. My investment group would find your insights valuable." Victoria reached into her purse and withdrew a business card with a handwritten number on the back. "This is a preliminary offer. It could increase significantly depending on what you provide." Stunned, Blanca stared at the card. "You're trying to bribe me to spy on my husband?" Victoria laughed. "Don't pretend this is a real marriage. We both know you're with him for the money. I'm simply offering you more." "You don't know anything about me," Blanca said quietly, "or my relationship with John." "Please," Victoria scoffed. "Every woman has her price. You've already proven yours by marrying him." The accusation hit too close to the truth, sending a flush of shame through Blanca. Yes, she had married for money, but not in the way Victoria implied. And despite their unconventional beginning, what existed between her and John now felt increasingly complex and genuine. "I think you should leave," Blanca repeated more firmly this time. "And you can take your offer with you." Victoria's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake. John will tire of you like all the others. When he does, you'll wish you'd been martyr." The elevator doors had barely closed behind Victoria when Blanca heard the private elevator arrive. John stepped out, his tie loosened, and fatigue evident in the set of his shoulders. He stopped when he saw Blanca standing in the foyer. "You're still up," he observed, his expression softening slightly. "Everything all right?" "You just missed Victoria Evans," Blanca said, watching his reaction carefully. Something flashed in his eyes, anger, perhaps, or concern. "What did she want?" "To buy information about Project Midas. She offered me $500,000. Blanca held out the business card. "I told her to leave." John took the card, his fingers brushing hers in the process. Rather than immediately releasing it, he held her gaze intently. "Why? Why what? Why did you refuse?" His voice was carefully neutral. "It's a considerable sum." Blanca pulled her hand away, stung by his apparent lack of trust. "Because it would be wrong, because despite how our marriage began, I wouldn't betray you." She turned toward the stairs. "Good night, John." "Blanca, wait." His voice stopped her. When she turned back, he had crossed the distance between them, standing close enough that she could see the fatigue in his eyes and smell the faint woodsy scent of his cologne. "Thank you," he said softly, "for your loyalty." Something in his tone made her look closer, suddenly understanding. This was a test, she realized. "You sent her to test me." John had the grace to look slightly ashamed. Not exactly. Victoria approached my company independently, but when security flagged her intentions, I allowed it to play out. You wanted to see if I could be bought. The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. I needed to know, he admitted quietly. Trust doesn't come easily to me. And did I pass your test? Blanca asked bitterly. To her surprise, John reached out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. With flying colors, the gentle touch scattered her anger, replacing it with a fluttering awareness that made it difficult to maintain her indignation. "Don't test me again," she whispered. "Ask me what you want to." "No." John's eyes darkened as his gaze dropped to her lips, then quickly returned to her eyes. "I'll remember that." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, until Blanca took a deliberate step back. "I should get some sleep." "Of course." John's hand fell away. "Good night, Blanca." Later, alone in her bed, Blanca replayed the moment in her mind, the warmth of his touch, the intensity in his eyes, the way her heart had raced when he stood so close. This attraction was dangerous, a complication neither of them had anticipated. Their marriage was meant to be a business transaction, not whatever this was becoming. The call came at 3 in the morning. Blanca fumbled for her phone in the darkness, her heart racing when she saw the hospital's number. "Miss Colano, it's Dr. Winters. Your grandmother has experienced complications. We need you here as soon as possible." The world tilted beneath her. "Is she?" "She's stable for now, but you should come quickly." Blanca hung up and scrambled out of bed, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. She had to book a flight, arrange transport to the airport, call the boutique to explain her absence. A knock at her door interrupted her panic. She opened it to find John standing there, fully dressed despite the hour. "I heard your phone," he explained. "Is everything all right?" "My grandmother," Blanca managed, her voice cracking. "She's had complications. I need to get to Houston." Without hesitation, John took her trembling hands in his. "My jet is already on standby. We can be there in 3 hours." "We," Blanca repeated. "I'm coming with you." His tone left no room for argument. "Unless you'd rather go alone?" The simple offer, so unexpected, so genuine, cracked something in Blanca's carefully maintained composure. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to be alone." For the first time since their arrangement began, she allowed herself to lean on him, drawing strength from his steady presence as they headed for the elevator. In that moment, John wasn't her business partner or reluctant husband. He was simply the person she needed most. And that realization was the most terrifying test of all. Chapter 5. Breaking Barriers. The Houston Hospital's cardiac unit buzzed with quiet efficiency as Blanca and John arrived shortly after dawn. Dr. Winters met them outside Elena's room, his expression carefully neutral as he explained the situation. "The preliminary treatment has been successful, but there's been some rejection of the medication. We've stabilized her for now, but she'll need more aggressive intervention until a suitable donor heart becomes available." "What are her chances?" Blanca asked, her voice steady despite her fear. "Better than they were," the doctor assured her. "Your grandmother is remarkably resilient." "Like her granddaughter," John remarked quietly. Blanca glanced at him in surprise. Throughout the flight, he had been a silent, supportive presence, arranging transportation, ensuring her comfort, and never once complaining about the sudden disruption to his schedule. Now, standing beside her in the sterile hospital corridor, in his rumpled suit, he looked nothing like the cold, calculating businessman who had orchestrated their marriage. "You can see her now," Dr. Winters said. "She's been asking for you." Blanca hesitated, then turned to John. "Would you come with me?" Something shifted in his expression, surprise followed by a softening she'd rarely witnessed. Of course, Elena. Colano's small frame seemed lost among the hospital equipment, but her dark eyes brightened when she saw Blanca. Then her gaze shifted to John, widening in recognition. "So you're the young man who married my granddaughter," she said, her voice weak but her spirit evident in every word. "Come closer so I can see you properly." John approached the bed with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "Mrs. Colano, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." Elena studied him with the penetrating insight that had always seen through Blanca's childhood fibs. Handsome, yes, but that means little. Do you love her? Abuela," Blanca protested, her cheeks flaming. John didn't falter. He met Elena's gaze directly. "I'm learning too," he said simply. The unexpected sincerity in his voice silenced both women. Elena's expression softened as she reached for his hand, then for Blanca's, joining them together over her hospital bed. "Good," she whispered. "That's a start." For 3 days, John remained at the hospital, working remotely from a private waiting room and ensuring both Blanca and Elena had everything they needed. He charmed the nursing staff, consulted with specialists, and most surprisingly sat for hours by Elena's bedside while Blanca rested, listening to stories of her childhood with genuine interest. On the 4th morning, Blanca woke in the uncomfortable hospital chair to find her head pillowed against John's shoulder, his arm protectively around her. Somehow, during the night, they had gravitated toward each other, seeking comfort in sleep. They wouldn't allow themselves awake. "Sorry," she murmured, starting to pull away. His arm tightened slightly. "Don't be," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "You needed rest." Their eyes met in the dim light of the hospital room, a new intimacy between them born of shared concern and close quarters. When John's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, Blanca felt a flutter of awareness that had nothing to do with their arrangement and everything to do with the man he was revealing himself to be. The moment was broken by Dr. Winters's arrival with unexpected news. A donor heart had become available, and Elena was being prepped for immediate surgery. "It's a perfect match," he explained, "the kind of opportunity we couldn't have hoped for so soon." Blanca's suspicions were confirmed when she overheard a conversation between John and the hospital administrator outside Elena's room. "Mr. Charnock, I want to thank you personally for the donation to our cardiac research department. The equipment we've been able to purchase has revolutionized our transplant program." "Just ensure Mrs. Colano receives the best possible care," John replied. "That's all that matters." When confronted, John admitted he'd made a substantial donation, but insisted Elena's match was legitimate. "I can't buy a heart, Blanca. I only made sure she was at the top of the list when one became available." "Why?" she asked, genuinely puzzled by his involvement. "This goes beyond our arrangement." John hesitated, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Because she matters to you, and you—" He didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes conveyed what he couldn't say. "You matter to me." The hours of Elena's surgery stretched into an eternity of waiting. When Blanca's composure finally cracked under the strain, John pulled her into his arms without hesitation, holding her against his chest as she released her fears in quiet sobs. "She'll be all right," he murmured into her hair. "She's strong like you." Blanca held onto him, drawing strength from his steady heartbeat. "Thank you for being here." His lips brushed her forehead in a touch so gentle she might have imagined it. "There's nowhere else I would be." That night, after receiving news of Elena's successful surgery, they returned to the hotel suite John had arranged. The past days had forged something new between them, shared worry transforming into shared relief, professional boundaries dissolving through gentle touches and whispered encouragements. Now, exhaustion and emotional release left Blanca standing in the living area, staring unseeing at the nighttime Houston skyline, acutely aware of John's presence in a way that transcended their careful arrangement. "You should rest," John said quietly from behind her. "I don't think I can sleep," she admitted. "Too much adrenaline." She turned to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For days, they had existed in a bubble of shared concern, professional boundaries slowly eroding with each hour spent together. Now, alone in the quiet hotel suite, the air between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. A sudden thunderclap broke the silence, followed by a torrential downpour against the windows. Blanca flinched visibly at the sound. "You're afraid of storms?" John asked, stepping closer. "Since childhood," she admitted. "We lived in an old apartment with a leaky roof. During hurricanes, the ceiling would sometimes collapse." Another lightning flash illuminated the room, followed immediately by a deafening thunderclap. Blanca instinctively moved toward John, who opened his arms without hesitation. She stepped into his embrace, feeling his arms close securely around her. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. They stood like that for long moments, the line between comfort and desire blurring with each passing second. When Blanca finally tilted her head back to thank him, she found his gaze fixed on her, lips with unmistakable hunger. "John," she whispered, his name a question and permission all at once. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing her lower lip with exquisite gentleness. "Tell me to stop," he said, his voice rough with restraint. Instead of answering, Blanca rose on her tiptoes, eliminating the last distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened as weeks of denied attraction erupted into overwhelming need. His arms tightened around her waist, lifting her slightly as her hands slid into his hair, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, John rested his forehead against hers. "This wasn't part of our arrangement," he said hoarsely. "I know," Blanca whispered, her heart racing. "I don't care." For one breathless moment, they hovered on the precipice of something neither had anticipated when they entered their marriage of convenience. Then a call from the hospital interrupted. Elena was awake and asking for them. Reality crashed back. As they hurriedly prepared to return to the hospital, the unspoken question lingered between them. Had they just complicated their arrangement beyond repair, or had they finally discovered its true purpose? At Elena's bedside, watching John hold her grandmother's hand with genuine affection, Blanca confronted an uncomfortable truth. Somewhere between their elaborate deception and this moment of authentic connection, she had begun to fall for the man she had accidentally married. And that, she realized, with a mixture of exhilaration and fear, was the most dangerous development of all. Chapter 6. Falling Surrender. The penthouse felt different when they returned from Houston 3 weeks later. Elena's successful recovery had lifted a weight from Blanca's shoulders, while the stolen kiss during the thunderstorm had shifted something fundamental between her and John. Neither had mentioned it since, maintaining a careful distance that felt more like self-preservation than disinterest. Blanca busied herself in her design studio, losing herself in work to avoid examining her growing feelings. The collection was taking shape, elegant pieces inspired by transformation and unexpected beauty, much like her own journey over the past months. In the evenings, she often found herself on the penthouse balcony, sketching as the city lights emerged. It was on one such evening that John found her, stepping through the glass doors with 2 mugs of tea. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a simple grey sweater that softened his usual imposing presence. "You've been out here for hours," he said, offering her a steaming mug. "I thought you might be cold." Blanca accepted the tea gratefully, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you. I lose track of time when I'm drawing." John settled into the chair beside her, closer than he would have dared before Houston. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her sketchbook. She hesitated only briefly before passing it to him. Showing her designs had always felt like exposing a piece of her soul, but somehow she trusted him with this vulnerability. John turned the pages carefully, studying each sketch with genuine interest. "These are remarkable, Blanca. You have extraordinary talent. They're for a collection I've been dreaming about for years," she admitted. "A line that combines structural elements with fluid movement, strength and softness together. Like you," John said quietly, raising his eyes to meet hers. The simple observation, so perceptive, so sincere, caught her off guard. In that moment, she glimpsed again the man beneath the billionaire facade, the one who had held her through her grandmother's surgery and kissed her with unexpected tenderness during the storm. "The studio you gave me has made it possible," she acknowledged. "I never had the space or resources before. You would have found a way," John replied with conviction. "You're remarkably resourceful." Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward, as they sipped their tea and watched the city below. When John finally spoke again, his voice had a different quality, hesitant, almost vulnerable. "I've been thinking about Houston." Blanca's heart skipped. "Which part?" His eyes met hers directly. "The part where I kissed you, or you kissed me. I'm still not entirely sure who started it." "Does it matter?" she asked softly. "It matters because our arrangement didn't include that." His gaze dropped briefly to her lips. "And because I've been wanting to do it again ever since." The admission hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Blanca set down her mug, her pulse quickening. "What's stopping you?" John's expression grew serious. "When we agreed to this marriage, you made it clear that intimacy wasn't part of the deal. I respect that boundary." "Boundaries can change," Blanca whispered. "People can change." He reached across the small space between them, taking her hand in his. "We should be clear about what this means. If we cross this line, there's no going back to our neat, compartmentalized arrangement." Blanca understood the weight of his warning. Physical intimacy would irrevocably complicate their carefully constructed facade, blurring the line between pretense and reality. Yet the thought of maintaining their distance for the remaining months of their contract had become increasingly painful. "I know," she said simply. John stood, drawing her to her feet before him. In the soft glow of the city lights, he studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Slowly, deliberately, he traced the curve of her cheek with his fingertips, giving her every opportunity to retreat. Instead, Blanca stepped closer, resting her hands against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat accelerating to match her own. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you." His restraint visibly crumbled at her words. John bent his head, capturing her lips in a kiss that contained none of the hesitation of their first embrace. This was hunger and need and longing finally unleashed, his arms pulling her against him as though he couldn't bear any space between them. Blanca responded with equal fervor, her fingers threading through his hair as the kiss deepened. Every touch, every taste was a revelation. The soft groan that escaped him when her teeth grazed his lower lip, the way his hands spanned her waist with possessive heat, the intoxicating scent of his skin. When they finally broke apart, breathless and dizzy, John rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure about this?" In answer, Blanca took his hand and led him inside, through the darkened penthouse to the threshold of her bedroom. There, she paused, suddenly aware of the significance of her choice. This room had been her sanctuary, the one space that remained exclusively hers in their complicated arrangement. John seemed to understand her hesitation. "We can stop," he murmured, though the desire in his eyes belied his words. "I don't want to stop," Blanca replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "I just want you to know that this isn't part of our deal. This is just us, whatever that means." Something softened in John's expression. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm with such tenderness that tears pricked at her eyes. "Then let's forget the deal," he said quietly, "just for tonight." What followed was nothing like Blanca had imagined during her secret moments of yearning. John's passion was matched by an unexpected gentleness, his touch reverent as he explored her body with meticulous attention. Each caress, each whispered endearment dismantled another layer of the walls between them. In the quiet aftermath, lying in the circle of his arms with her head pillowed on his chest, Blanca felt both completely exposed and utterly safe. His fingers traced lazy patterns along her spine as their breathing gradually steadied. "You're thinking very loudly," John murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Blanca smiled against his skin. "I'm wondering what happens now." "Now we sleep," he replied, tightening his arms around her. "And tomorrow, we figure it out together." The promise in those simple words, "together," carried her into dreamless sleep. The following weeks brought a transformation neither had anticipated. Their public appearances as husband and wife, once carefully choreographed performances, gained an authentic quality that even the most skeptical observers couldn't question. In private, they discovered each other in ways that went far beyond physical intimacy. John taught Blanca to swim in the penthouse's private pool, his hands steady and patient as she conquered her childhood fear of water. She introduced him to the simple pleasure of cooking, laughing at his initial clumsiness with a spatula and rewarding his efforts with kisses that frequently delayed dinner. On rainy Sundays, they built blanket forts in the living room and watched old movies, his usual reserve dissolving as he recounted childhood memories he'd shared with no one else, the toy boat his father had carved before the accident, the secret hideaway he'd discovered in his grandfather's mansion, the stray dog he'd loved and lost. In turn, Blanca revealed her own closely guarded stories, her mother's abandonment when she was 7, her struggle to fit in at design school, among wealthy classmates, her deepest fear that her talent would never be enough to overcome her lack of connections. "I want to take you somewhere," John said one evening as they lay tangled together. "Somewhere important to me." The following weekend, they drove 2 hours upstate to a secluded lake house surrounded by autumn foliage. The modest cabin stood in stark contrast to John's usual luxury. "This was my parents' place," he explained, unlocking the door with a key he wore around his neck. "The only thing my grandfather couldn't sell after they died. I've kept it exactly as it was." Blanca stepped inside reverently, understanding the magnitude of his gesture. The cabin was a time capsule, family photos on pine walls, worn furniture, arranged for conversation rather than appearance, books and board games stacked on shelves. "You had a good childhood before you lost them," she observed softly, touching a photo of a laughing, dark-haired boy held aloft on his father's shoulders. "The best," John confirmed, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never brought anyone here before." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implication. This wasn't just any place, this was his sanctuary, his most private self laid bare. "Why me?" Blanca asked, needing to understand. John took her hands in his expression more vulnerable than she'd ever seen it. "Because you've somehow become the person I trust most in the world," he admitted. "Because when I'm with you, I remember the person I was meant to be, before loss and ambition hardened me." That night, they made love before the cabin's fireplace, their connection transcending the physical as something deeper took root between them, something neither had expected from their calculated beginning, something that terrified and exhilarated them in equal measure. In the flickering firelight, as Blanca drifted towards sleep in his arms, John whispered words he thought she couldn't hear. "I'm falling in love with you." But she heard, and in the secret chamber of her heart, she acknowledged the truth she wasn't yet brave enough to speak aloud. She was falling too, helplessly and completely, for the man she had accidentally married. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. As autumn deepened into winter, Blanca and John settled into a rhythm that blurred the boundaries of their arrangement into something that felt increasingly genuine. Their first anniversary approached, a milestone neither had expected to celebrate when they'd entered their marriage of convenience. Blanca wanted to mark the occasion with something meaningful. After much consideration, she reached out to Eliza. Jen, a prominent designer she'd admired for years, who had recently established her own label after leaving a major fashion house. "I'd like to create a small collection," Blanca explained during their first meeting in a Chelsea cafe. "Something that tells a story, our story." Eliza studied Blanca's portfolio with genuine interest. "These are exceptional. You have a distinctive voice that's been missing in the industry. Why approach me, though? You clearly have the talent to do this independently. I need guidance on production, materials sourcing, industry connections," Blanca admitted. "And, honestly, validation from someone established. This collection is personal. I want to do it right." "A gift for your husband?" Eliza guessed shrewdly. Blanca nodded, a soft smile playing at her lips. "Our anniversary. I want to surprise him by launching something that honors both our journeys." What Blanca didn't know was that Eliza Chen had recently been approached by Maxwell Innovations, one of Charnock Technology's main competitors. While she had turned down their proposal for an exclusive partnership, she maintained connections within the company that would later prove catastrophic. Their collaboration began in earnest, with Blanca spending increasing time away from the penthouse in Eliza's studio. She maintained her secrecy carefully, telling John only that she was working on a new project that required outside consultation. Meanwhile, John was immersed in the final development stages of Project Midas, the revolutionary encryption software that would transform digital security if successful. The pressure was immense, with investors and competitors watching every move. Parker Davis, John's executive assistant, who had been with him for 5 years, took particular notice of Blanca's absences. He had never approved of John's sudden marriage, convinced that Blanca was an opportunist who had somehow manipulated his boss. Parker had spent years in John's shadow. Watching him achieve the success and recognition Parker believed he himself deserved. Each genuine smile John directed at Blanca only deepened Parker's resentment. The billionaire had everything, and now, apparently even genuine love. His suspicions intensified when he noticed her meeting repeatedly with Eliza Chen, whose connections to Maxwell Innovations he was aware of through industry gossip. "Mr. Charnock," Parker said one evening, entering John's office with deliberate hesitation, "there's something I feel obligated to bring to your attention, though it's uncomfortable." John glanced up from his computer, brow furrowed. "What is it, Parker?" "It's about Mrs. Charnock." He placed several photographs on John's desk, surveillance-style images of Blanca entering Eliza Chen's studio, the two women in deep conversation over coffee, documents spread between them. "She's been meeting regularly with Eliza Chen. As you know, Chen has connections to Maxwell Innovations." John stared at the photos, his expression unreadable. "You've been having my wife followed?" Parker shifted uncomfortably. After the Victoria Evans incident, security protocols were enhanced for all family members. These were routine observations that raised red flags. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" John's voice had grown dangerously quiet. "I'm not suggesting anything, sir. Just reporting concerning patterns. Mrs. Charnock has no background in technology, yet she's spending significant time with someone connected to your primary competitor during the final phase of Project Midas." The seed of doubt was planted skillfully, fertilized by John's deeply rooted fear of betrayal and abandonment. Though he tried to dismiss Parker's implications, the photographs lingered in his mind, raising questions he couldn't silence. That night, when Blanca returned home late, flushed with excitement from a productive session with Eliza, she found John uncharacteristically distant. "Long day?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Productive," Blanca replied, settling beside him on the sofa and reaching for his hand. "How was yours?" "Informative." John's fingers remained stiff in hers. "How's Eliza Chen these days?" Blanca froze, her heart suddenly racing. "How did you know that you've been meeting with her regularly?" John withdrew his hand. "Is there something you want to tell me, Blanca?" The coldness in his tone caught her off guard. "It's not what you think." "What exactly do I think?" His eyes had turned to ice, reminiscent of the calculating businessman she'd first met rather than the warm, loving man she'd come to know. "You think I'm hiding something," Blanca said carefully, hurt building behind her careful composure. "And I am, but not what you're implying. It's a surprise." John stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "A surprise that requires weeks of secret meetings with someone connected to Maxwell Innovations. During the exact period when Project Midas is most vulnerable." The accusation hung between them like a physical barrier. Blanca rose slowly, disbelief warring with anger. "You think I'm what? Spying on you? Stealing your technology secrets?" Her voice shook with emotion. "After everything we've shared, you believe I would betray you?" "I don't know what to believe," John replied, his voice controlled despite the storm in his eyes. "I know that our marriage began as a business arrangement. I know that $5 million is a powerful motivator, and I know that people I've trusted have betrayed me before." Each word struck Blanca like a physical blow. "So that's still all this is to you? A business arrangement? A transaction? Isn't that what we agreed to?" John countered, his walls visibly rebuilding with each second. Blanca stepped toward him, desperate to bridge the sudden chasm between them. "Things changed. You know they did. What happened at the cabin, what you whispered when you thought I was asleep, did that mean nothing?" John's expression flickered with surprise before hardening again. "I need to protect my company, Blanca. Thousands of people depend on me. And what about us? What about what we've built together?" Tears threatened, but Blanca refused to let them fall. "Ask me directly, John. Whatever you want to know, just ask me." Instead of answering, John reached for his phone, pulling up a document. "Project Midas will include quantum-resistant cryptography, utilizing a proprietary algorithm we've developed. The alpha testing begins next Tuesday with selected partners under strict NDAs." Blanca frowned in confusion. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it's false information," John replied coldly. "A test to see where it leads." Understanding dawned, with sickening clarity. "You're testing me? Again? After everything?" The pain in her voice finally penetrated John's armor, doubt flickering across his features. But before he could respond, his phone chimed with an urgent notification. Parker had forwarded an email, a message from Eliza Chen to her contact at Maxwell Innovations, containing vague references to quantum cryptography and Tuesday's timeline, details that mirrored the false information John had just shared with Blanca. What John couldn't know was that Parker had fabricated the email, manipulating separate communications to create damning evidence. The betrayal came not from Blanca, but from the assistant who had spent years cultivating John's trust while resenting his success. "You should see this," John said, his voice hollow as he handed her the phone. Blanca read the email, color draining from her face. "This isn't possible. I never discussed your work with Eliza, never." "The evidence suggests otherwise." John's expression had turned to stone. "Evidence can be manipulated," Blanca countered desperately. "You have to believe me." Our meetings were about a fashion collection, a surprise for our anniversary. Check my sketches, call Eliza yourself. For one breathless moment, John's certainty wavered. Then his phone chimed again with another fabricated message, and his final doubts crystallized into cold conviction. "I wanted to believe in us," he said, quietly. "But some things are too deeply ingrained to change. Trust has never come easily to me." "You have to make a choice, John," Blanca whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "Believe in the wife you've come to know, or believe in your fears. You can't have both." When he didn't immediately answer, Blanca slowly removed her wedding ring, placing it on the coffee table between them. The small platinum circle gleamed in the low light, a symbol of all they had built and might now lose. "When you're ready to trust me, truly trust me, I'll be waiting," she said, her voice breaking. "But I won't stay where I'm not believed." She walked to her room with measured steps, packed a small bag, and called a taxi. John remained frozen by the window, trapped between his deeply rooted fear of betrayal and the desperate love he'd never expected to find. When Blanca descended to the lobby, he didn't follow. The choice had been made in his silence. Outside in the cold December night, Blanca finally allowed herself to break, tears flowing freely as the taxi carried her away from the man she loved. A man whose wounds ran too deep to allow him to love her completely in return. What she couldn't know was that in her wake, John had finally checked her studio, discovering the anniversary collection sketches and the invitation to the showcase she had planned as his surprise. The evidence of her innocence arrived moments too late, as the lights of her taxi disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. The ring she had left behind felt impossibly heavy in his palm. As realization dawned, he had just committed the very betrayal he had feared from her. He had broken the heart of the one person who had truly loved him. Chapter 8. Shattered Hearts. Blanca's old apartment building looked exactly as she remembered. Worn brick facade, flickering security light, narrow hallway. Scented with decades of cooking spices. Her former neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, had kept her tiny studio apartment vacant, using it for storage, while Blanca was away playing princess, as she put it. "I knew you'd be back someday, Nina," the older woman said, helping Blanca clear space for a mattress among boxes of seasonal decorations. "Men like that, they want toys, not wives." Blanca didn't correct her. How could she explain that John had become so much more than the calculating businessman who had tricked her into marriage? How could she describe the tenderness he'd shown at her grandmother's bedside, or the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd shared his childhood home? The truth was too complex, too painful to voice aloud. For 3 days, she moved through life in a fog of grief, mechanically going through motions without truly engaging. Her phone remained silent. No calls, no messages from John. Each hour of silence confirmed her fear. His pride and suspicion mattered more than what they had built together. The tiny apartment's peeling paint and creaking floors stood in stark contrast to the penthouse's polished luxury, the scent of her neighbor's cooking replacing the subtle fragrance of fresh flowers that had always filled their home. On the 4th day, Eliza Chen arrived at her door, concern evident in her usually composed features. "Your husband's assistant called me," she explained, accepting the chipped mug of tea Blanca offered. "Asked some very pointed questions about our meetings and implied I was involved in corporate espionage. What's happening, Blanca?" Tears welled as Blanca explained the misunderstanding and its devastating aftermath. "John thinks I've been using our relationship to steal information about his new project." Eliza's expression darkened. "That's absurd. We've never discussed his company. Our meetings have been exclusively about your collection." "Someone manipulated information to make it look otherwise," Blanca said quietly. "And John chose to believe the worst of me because it confirmed his existing fears," Eliza observed, shrewdly. Men like your husband build empires because they trust no one. It's difficult for them to break that pattern, even when presented with evidence to the contrary. The insight struck close to Blanca's heart. John's inability to trust stemmed from profound loss. Parents gone too soon, a grandfather who taught him that vulnerability was weakness, a lifetime of people wanting him for his wealth rather than himself. Understanding the source of his suspicion didn't lessen the pain of it, but it helped her see the full tragedy of their situation. "The collection is nearly ready," Eliza said, changing tactics when Blanca remained silent. "We could still hold the showcase as planned. Perhaps seeing the truth so publicly displayed would shake his certainty." Blanca shook her head. "The collection was meant to be a gift, a celebration of our journey together. Now it feels like a memorial to something beautiful that died too soon." "Or," Eliza suggested gently, "it could be your phoenix, rising from the ashes of disappointment into something powerful and uniquely yours. This collection tells your story, Blanca. Don't let his failure of faith silence your voice." That night, alone in her narrow bed, Blanca made a decision. She would complete the collection, not for John or their anniversary, but for herself, a testament to her growth and resilience. If their love had been real, it deserved proper commemoration. And if it was truly over, she needed the closure that finishing this work would bring. Across town in the penthouse that now felt cavernously empty, John Charnock sat in Blanca's abandoned studio, surrounded by the evidence of her innocence. The sketchbooks revealed the collection she'd been creating, each piece subtly incorporating elements of their story together. The invitation to the showcase named the collection Serendipity, When Chance Becomes Destiny. Beside him sat the findings from his security team's investigation, irrefutable proof that Parker had fabricated the emails, manipulated evidence, and deliberately sowed distrust between John and Blanca. The betrayal had come from within his carefully constructed walls, not from the woman who had somehow breached them. John reached for his phone to call her, then set it down again. What could he possibly say? That he was sorry for doubting her, that he had allowed his deepest fears to poison the most precious gift he'd ever received. Words seemed hopelessly inadequate against the magnitude of his failure. Instead, he did what he had always done when faced with a problem. He acted. Parker was terminated with evidence turned over to legal authorities. A private investigator was hired to monitor Blanca's well-being from a respectful distance. And most importantly, he began the painful process of examining why, despite all evidence to the contrary, he had found it easier to believe in betrayal than in love. Weeks passed with no contact between them. Blanca threw herself into completing her collection, working alongside Eliza with singular focus. The pieces evolved beyond their original concept, incorporating elements of heartbreak and resilience alongside the love that had inspired them. Elena called often from Houston, her strength returning with each passing day. "Have you spoken to him?" she asked during each conversation. "No," Blanca would answer softly. "There's nothing left to say." "Pride is a poor companion in old age, mi vida," her grandmother warned. "Don't let it steal your joy now." But it wasn't pride keeping Blanca silent, it was self-preservation. She had offered John her heart completely, and he had questioned its loyalty. To open herself to that pain again felt impossible. January brought bitter cold to New York, and an unexpected development in Blanca's career. Her collection caught the attention of a prominent fashion editor who attended one of her fittings with Eliza. "This is extraordinary work," the woman said, examining the construction of a jacket whose seams subtly formed the constellation visible the night John had first kissed Blanca. "We'd like to feature it in our March issue, a full spread on emerging designers challenging conventional narratives." The opportunity was beyond anything Blanca had dreamed possible 6 months earlier, yet as she signed the necessary paperwork, She felt John's absence like a physical ache. This moment should have been theirs to celebrate together. That evening, returning to her tiny apartment through swirling snow, Blanca found a small package outside her door. Inside lay a delicate glass snowflake ornament, an exact replica of one that had hung on the Christmas tree at John's cabin, which she had admired during their weekend there. No note accompanied it, but she knew instantly who had sent it. The gesture spoke volumes. He remembered the smallest details of their time together. He was thinking of her. He was sorry, but was sorry enough. As January turned to February, Blanca's collection neared completion. The showcase was scheduled for Valentine's Day, a date that had seemed romantically significant when she'd first planned the event as an anniversary surprise. Now it felt like a cosmic joke, unveiling a collection born of love on a day dedicated to it, while her own heart lay in pieces. What Blanca didn't know was that John had been fighting his own battles during their separation. For the first time in his life, he had begun therapy, confronting the deep-rooted trauma of his childhood abandonment and its impact on his ability to trust. He had visited Elena in Houston, confessing his failures and seeking her wisdom. He had even tracked down Blanca's estranged mother, funding rehabilitation that might someday allow for reconciliation, though he asked that his involvement remain anonymous. Most significantly, he had restructured Charnock Technologies, stepping back from day-to-day operations to create space for something more important than empire building, the capacity to love without fear. 3 days before the showcase, a major snowstorm paralyzed Manhattan. Blanca worked late at Eliza's studio, finalizing details for the event. When she finally emerged onto the snow-covered street at midnight, she found herself stranded. No taxis, no ride shares, subways suspended. Wrapping her coat tighter against the biting wind, she began the long walk home, each step sinking into fresh powder. 6 blocks in, her fingers and toes had gone numb despite her gloves and boots. The wind howled between buildings, driving icy particles against her cheeks like tiny needles. Through the swirling white, headlights approached slowly, a black SUV crawling along the deserted street. Blanca tensed as it pulled alongside her, then stopped. The passenger window lowered. "Blanca." John's voice carried through the howling wind. "Please get in." She stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the sudden collision of longing and hurt. He looked different, thinner, with shadows beneath his eyes and several days' stubble darkening his jaw. His usual immaculate appearance had given way to something more human, more vulnerable. "How did you find me?" she asked, her voice nearly lost in the storm. "I've always known where you were," he admitted. "I just didn't know if you wanted to be found." The simple honesty in his voice broke through her defenses. Wordlessly, she opened the door and climbed inside, the vehicle's warmth highlighting just how cold she had become. They sat in silence as John navigated the empty streets, wipers fighting a losing battle against the relentless snow. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I've been trying to find the right words for 62 days. He kept his eyes on the road. "There aren't any." Blanca watched his profile, the strong lines of his face now etched with regret. "Then why are you here?" "Because I can't bear another day without telling you that you were right about everything." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "I let fear poison the most precious thing I've ever had. I didn't trust you because I've never truly trusted love itself." The raw honesty in his voice penetrated the walls Blanca had built around her heart. "Trust isn't something you can promise once and be done with, John. It's a choice you make every day." "I know that now." He pulled the vehicle to the curb, finally turning to face her fully. "I'm not asking for forgiveness I haven't earned. I'm asking for the chance to show you who I'm becoming, someone worthy of the love you offered so freely." Snowflakes gathered on the windshield, cocooning them in a private world where only truth could survive. "I've missed you," Blanca whispered, the admission escaping before she could contain it. "Even when I was furious with you, I missed you every day." John reached across the console, hesitating before taking her gloved hand in his. "Come home, Blanca." The plea, so simple, so profound, hung between them. This was the crossroads, forgiveness or finality, restoration or regret. "I can't," she said softly, pain lancing through her at the devastation that crossed his features. "Not yet. We both need time to heal properly, to be sure." John nodded slowly, acceptance replacing disappointment. "I understand. Can I at least take you to your apartment? It's dangerous out tonight." As they drove the remaining distance in silence, Blanca realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time since she'd known him, John had heard no and respected it completely, without negotiation or manipulation. Perhaps they both were changing after all. At her building, he insisted on walking her to her door, despite the treacherous conditions. Outside her apartment, snowmelt dripping from their coats, they faced each other with all pretense stripped away. "I'll be at your showcase," John said quietly. "In the back. You won't even know I'm there." Blanca felt unexpected tears warm her cold cheeks. "Why?" "Because it matters to you." He reached out tentatively, brushing a snowflake from her hair with heartbreaking gentleness. "And everything that matters to you matters to me, even if I'm no longer part of your life." After he left, Blanca stood in her tiny apartment, listening to his footsteps recede down the hall. The distance between them had never felt so vast or so bridgeable. For the first time since leaving the penthouse, she allowed herself to wonder if what lay broken between them might somehow be mended, transformed into something stronger at the wounded places. Like the collection she had created from her pain, perhaps their love wasn't ending but evolving, becoming deeper, more resilient, and ultimately more beautiful for having survived the breaking. Chapter 9. Fighting for Love. Valentine's Day dawned crisp and clear, sunlight fracturing through ice crystals that still clung to New York's windows. Blanca stood in the makeshift dressing area behind the gallery, where her showcase would debut in hours, surrounded by the collection that had become her salvation. "Nervous?" Eliza asked, making final adjustments to the display order. "Terrified," Blanca admitted, touching the centerpiece gown, an architectural marvel of cascading silk panels in shades of midnight blue to palest dawn, representing the journey from darkness to light. "This feels like sharing my diary with the world." "The best art always does." Eliza squeezed her shoulder. "By the way, someone sent these for you." She handed Blanca a small box containing a pair of antique pearl earrings. The note read simply, "For courage. Your grandmother wore these at her wedding. She thought you might want them today." Blanca's fingers trembled as she fastened them to her ears. Even now, separated by pain and pride, John was thinking of the details that would matter most to her. He hadn't signed his full name, a silent acknowledgement that he no longer presumed intimacy, yet the gesture itself spoke of a deeper understanding than he'd ever shown before. The gallery filled quickly, fashion editors and industry insiders mingling with select media and potential buyers. Blanca remained backstage, peering occasionally through a gap in the curtains. Despite telling herself not to look, her eyes searched the room repeatedly for John's tall figure. "He's here," Eliza murmured, appearing at her shoulder. Back corner, trying very hard to be invisible. Blanca's heart twisted as she caught a glimpse of him, dressed simply in charcoal grey, his posture tense as he avoided drawing attention. He looked both familiar and like a stranger, the distance between them palpable even across the crowded room. "Are you ready?" Eliza asked as the gallery lights dimmed for the presentation. Blanca took a deep breath. As I'll ever be. The showcase unfolded like a visual poem, models moving through carefully choreographed sequences that revealed the narrative embedded in each piece. A structured jacket with hidden embroidery of cherry blossoms represented their first meeting in John's garden. A flowing blouse with subtle architectural details echoed the Manhattan skyline visible from the penthouse balcony where they had shared evening conversations. Each creation provoked murmurs of appreciation, but it was the final piece that brought a hush over the crowd. The midnight-to-dawn gown, inspired by their night at the cabin, when John had whispered his love while thinking Blanca slept. As the model completed her turn, a spotlight illuminated the back of the dress, revealing delicate beadwork that formed the constellation visible that night. When the lights rose for the finale, spontaneous applause erupted. Fashion editors converged on Eliza, while buyers clamored for private viewings. Through it all, Blanca stood quietly, accepting congratulations, her gaze occasionally drifting to the corner where John remained, watching but not approaching, respecting her need for space. While supporting her triumph, it was nearly midnight when the last guests departed. Blanca sat alone amid the remnants of the event, physically and emotionally exhausted. The showcase had been an unqualified success, orders placed, appointments scheduled with major retailers, a feature confirmed in Vogue. Everything she had ever professionally dreamed of was suddenly within reach, yet the victory felt hollow without the one person she most wanted to share it with. A soft footfall broke the silence. She looked up to find John standing in the doorway, hesitation evident in every line of his body. "I was just leaving," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding." Blanca's voice emerged steadier than she felt. "Thank you for the earrings, for remembering." "I remember everything." His gaze held hers with painful intensity. "Every moment with you is etched into my memory." The simple confession pierced her carefully maintained composure. "Why are you here, John? Really?" He moved into the room, but maintained a respectful distance. "To witness your triumph. To support you, even from afar." He paused, vulnerability evident in his eyes, "and selfishly to see you, even if just for a moment." Moonlight streamed through the gallery's skylights, casting both in silver illumination that stripped away pretense. In that ethereal glow, Blanca saw the changes in him. Not just physical thinness, but a new openness in his expression, as though layers of armor had been shed. "Your collection was extraordinary," he continued. "Every piece told our story with such truth and beauty. I didn't deserve such grace." "The collection isn't about what you deserve," Blanca replied softly. "It's about what was real between us, despite everything." John moved closer, his steps measured as though approaching something precious and wild. "I've spent every day since. You left trying to become someone worthy of that reality, someone capable of trust, vulnerability, love without conditions. Parker has been arrested for corporate espionage and fraud, but honestly, I'm more concerned about the damage I did to us than the damage he did to the company." "Those aren't qualities you can acquire through sheer determination, John." "No," he agreed, stopping an arm's length away. "They're choices you make moment by moment, day after day, and I'm making them, Blanca, even knowing you might never come back." She studied him, searching for signs of the calculating businessman who had once viewed their marriage as a transaction. Instead, she found only raw honesty in his gaze. "I've been seeing a therapist," he continued when she remained silent. "Learning to recognize how trauma shaped my inability to trust. It doesn't excuse what I did, but it helps me understand it and change it." "I'm glad," Blanca said sincerely, though her heart ached with the space still between them. John reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. I've been carrying this since the night you left. He opened it to reveal her wedding ring, the platinum band she had placed on the coffee table before walking away. I had it remade, he explained, holding it out so she could see the new engraving. Inside, trust chosen daily, love without fear. Blanca's breath caught as the meaning of the inscription washed over her. It wasn't a demand or expectation. It was a promise of how he intended to love her if given the chance. I'm not asking you to wear it again, John said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm asking if I can earn the right to place it on your finger. Someday, when you're ready, if you're ever ready. Blanca's breath caught, her voice dropping to a whisper. You've changed. Because of you, he whispered. You showed me what love could be. Even if we're never together again, that gift changed me forever. Blanca stood, closing the distance between them with slow steps. I needed this time apart, she admitted, to find myself outside of us, to know I could survive without you. And now I know I can live without you. She reached up to touch his face, feeling him tremble beneath her fingertips. But I don't want to. Hope flared in John's eyes, quickly tempered with caution. Blanca, I can't promise I'll never fail. Again, I can only promise to keep trying, keep growing, keep choosing trust even when fear whispers otherwise. That's all anyone can promise, she whispered. When their lips finally met, it wasn't with the desperate passion of their earlier romance, but with something deeper, a tender recognition of broken pieces carefully gathered and offered again. This kiss held both memory and possibility, acknowledging pain without being defined by it. Come home, John murmured against her lips, echoing his plea from the snowstorm night, but this time Blanca heard the difference. He wasn't asking her to return to his penthouse or his life as it had been. He was asking her to build something new with him, a home created from genuine love rather than convenience or arrangement. Not yet, she answered gently, feeling him tense before she continued. But soon, when we're both ready to begin again, properly this time. In the moonlit gallery, surrounded by fabric manifestations of their journey, they held each other with the careful wonder of those who had nearly lost everything. Their path forward wouldn't be simple or immediate, but for the first time since their separation, both could see it clearly, a future built on choice rather than chance, on trust deliberately, cultivated rather than demanded. The night their accidental marriage had truly become a choice. Chapter 10. Vows of Forever. Spring arrived in New York with an explosion of cherry blossoms and renewal, mirroring the careful rebirth happening between Blanca and John. They had chosen to begin again slowly, dating properly, learning each other with fresh eyes and open hearts. 3 months had passed since the showcase, a period of deliberate healing and rediscovery. John had temporarily stepped back from Charnock Technologies, appointing a trusted CEO while he focused on personal growth and rebuilding what mattered most. Blanca had moved into a small but beautiful apartment in Chelsea, establishing her independence, while nurturing her burgeoning design career. They met twice weekly for scheduled dates and spoke daily, but maintained separate residences, a boundary that both respected as necessary for their new foundation. Tonight marked a special milestone, their first official attendance as a couple at the annual Metropolitan Museum Gala, where Blanca had been invited to showcase one of her designs worn by a prominent actress. As she prepared in her apartment, surrounded by fabric swatches and sketches for her expanding collection, her phone chimed with a message from John. Look outside your window. Curious, she moved to the small balcony overlooking the street below. There stood John beside his car, gazing up at her with a smile that still made her heart skip. Instead of his usual driver, he had come personally to escort her, a small gesture that spoke volumes about the man he was becoming. You look beautiful, he said simply when she joined him. his eyes taking in the elegant gown she had designed specifically for tonight. A creation in pale gold that caught the light with every movement. "Thank you for coming yourself," Blanca replied, accepting his offered hand with the flutter of anticipation that had never diminished, even through their separation. "I wanted tonight to be just us," John explained as they drove toward the museum. "No staff, no barriers, just John and Blanca." At the gala, they navigated the red carpet with practiced ease, John's hand resting protectively at the small of her back. Despite the cameras and curious stares, they moved in their own intimate bubble, exchanging private glances and subtle touches that spoke of reconnection deepening with each passing day. "Your dress is causing quite a stir," John murmured, as yet. Another attendee complimented Blanca's design. "Everyone's asking who created it." "Let them wonder a little longer," she replied with a secret smile. "Tonight isn't about business." As they circulated through the glittering crowd, Blanca noticed a shift in how John engaged with others. Where once he had been politely distant, now he listened with genuine interest, laughed more freely, and introduced Blanca not as his wife, but with words that carried deeper meaning. "This is Blanca, the woman who taught me what matters." Near midnight, when the celebration reached its peak, John led her away from the crowd to a secluded balcony overlooking the museum gardens. The space had been transformed with hundreds of tiny lights and scattered cherry blossoms, an echo of their first meeting in his garden. "What is all this?" Blanca asked, wonder in her voice as she took in the magical setting. John's expression turned serious as he took both her hands in his. "1 year ago today, you walked into my life through an arrangement neither of us truly chose. What began as transaction became the greatest gift I've ever received, and the one I nearly destroyed through fear." Blanca squeezed his hands gently, acknowledging the pain they had traversed without allowing it to overshadow this moment. "These past months apart taught me something essential," John continued. "That love isn't possession or protection or providing, it's presence. It's choosing someone every day, especially when that choice is difficult." Reaching into his pocket, he withdrew a small box unlike any jewelry case Blanca had seen before. Handcrafted wood, inlaid with mother of pearl. "This isn't your wedding ring," he clarified, seeing her expression. "That remains yours to reclaim when, if you're ready." Instead, the box contained a delicate key fashioned from rose gold, hung on a simple chain. "What does it open?" Blanca asked softly. "A new beginning." John's voice roughened with emotion. "I found a cottage on the Hudson, small, surrounded by gardens, filled with light for your designs. Not a penthouse or mansion, but a true home we could build together. Equal partners, no power imbalance, no reminders of our past mistakes." Tears gathered in Blanca's eyes as she recognized the profound significance of his gesture. John Charnock, who had built his identity on towering achievements and material success, was offering something revolutionary, a humble space created for love rather than impression. "This isn't a demand or expectation," he hastened to add. "The cottage will wait until you're ready, a month from now, a year, never. The choice is entirely yours, as it always should have been." Blanca cradled the key in her palm, feeling its weight, so light physically, yet carrying the gravity of everything they had endured and everything they might become. "May I see it?" she asked. "This cottage?" John's expression brightened with cautious hope. "Now? Now?" Blanca smiled through her tears. "Tonight feels like the right time for new beginnings." They slipped away from the gala, driving north along the moonlit Hudson until the city lights faded behind them. When they finally turned onto a winding country road, Blanca felt a sense of peaceful anticipation, unlike anything she had experienced in their tumultuous history. The cottage appeared around a final bend, a stone structure with climbing roses, framing the doorway, surrounded by gardens that would explode with color come summer. Though modest by John's former standards, it radiated character and warmth even in darkness. "It's perfect," Blanca whispered as they approached, the key warm in her hand. Inside, the space revealed John's thoughtful attention to detail. Walls of windows to capture natural light, a studio space with northern exposure ideal for design work, cozy rooms that invited conversation and comfort rather than formality. But it was the bedroom that finally broke Blanca's composure. There, framed above a simple fireplace, hung her very first design sketch, the one John had discovered in her portfolio during that initial deceptive wedding ceremony, when he had commented on her talent before either knew how their lives would intertwine. "You kept it," she managed through tears. "All this time." "It was the first honest moment between us," John said quietly. "Before arrangements and conditions, just your talent and my recognition of it." Blanca turned to face him fully, the months of careful distance suddenly unbearable. "I've been so afraid of rushing back to what we had," she confessed, "of losing myself in us again." "What we had was beautiful but broken," John acknowledged, reaching to brush a tear from her cheek. "What we could build now would be different, intentional, chosen with open eyes and whole hearts." In the gentle firelight of a home that represented possibility rather than past, Blanca made her decision. From her evening purse, she withdrew a small velvet pouch that had accompanied her everywhere since the night of her showcase. "I've been carrying this," she admitted, opening it to reveal her wedding ring, the one John had reforged with its promise engraved inside. Understanding dawned in his eyes as she held it out to him. "Are you sure?" "I'm choosing this," Blanca said firmly. "Not because of arrangements or obligations, but because I want to build a life with the man you're becoming. The man who sees me completely and loves me anyway." With hands that trembled slightly, John took the ring. "With this ring, I promise to choose trust daily," he said softly, sliding it onto her finger. "To love without fear, to grow with you, rather than around you. To remember always that my greatest gift is not what I can give you, but how I can love you." When their lips met, it felt both familiar and entirely new, the first kiss of their chosen beginning rather than their accidental start. In that moment, surrounded by moonlight streaming through cottage windows, they silently acknowledged that sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with wrong turns. 3 months later, on a perfect summer evening, they gathered in the cottage garden with only their closest loved ones present. Elena, fully recovered and radiant with joy, stood beside Blanca as she prepared for a ceremony unlike their first. "Are you nervous, mi vida?" her grandmother asked, adjusting the simple crown of wildflowers in Blanca's hair. "Not this time," Blanca replied with serene certainty. "This time, I know exactly what I'm saying yes to." The garden path opened before her, lined with candles glowing like earthbound stars. At its end waited John, not in an expensive suit, but in simple linen, his face open with a vulnerability and joy that transformed his handsome features into something transcendent. Their vows, spoken without officiant or audience expectations, flowed from hearts that had learned love's true language through pain and restoration. "I promise to remember that love is not possession, but freedom," John vowed, his voice steady with conviction. "To trust, not just in good times, but especially in doubt. To see you always as you truly are, my accidental beginning and my deliberate forever." Blanca's answering promise came wrapped in the strength she had discovered within herself. "I vow to bring my whole self to our marriage, not just the easy parts, but my dreams, fears, and truths. To choose you daily, not from need, but from want. To remember always that our greatest story began with our greatest mistake." As twilight settled around them, John and Blanca sealed their intentional vows with a kiss that held both their painful past and hopeful future, a complete circle of breaking and mending. Later that night, as they lay tangled together in the cottage that had become home, John traced the curve of Blanca's face with reverent fingers. "What are you thinking?" she asked, catching his hand and pressing a kiss to his palm. "That some people spend lifetimes searching for what we stumbled into by accident," he murmured, "and that I'll spend the rest of mine grateful for the mistake that brought you to me and the love that made you stay." Outside their window, fireflies danced like scattered stars, illuminating the garden where their new beginning had been planted. No longer an accidental marriage, but a deliberate union of two souls who had learned that sometimes love's deepest roots grow from rocky soil, and that the hearts most beautifully mended are those that were brave enough to break.